So good to see you. If you're joining us in the room right now, I see Matthew Laird there. Matthew, what's up? Good to see you. Minia, Ryan Campbell. If you guys are like, oh no, I have a dog behind me, don't worry, I can't see you. I can just see that you're here. And Alan and I, you can see us, and we want to know where you are coming from in the world. I see Scott Garner. Scott could be in the Chicago area because I know you, Scott, but I don't know where Susan is. So Tommy, let us know where you're at. Everybody, let us know where you're at. Pop open the chat window and say hi. Sarah's joining from Philly. Minnie is joining us from the ATL down south. Minia, this is the second person from Georgia I've been talking to this week. Awesome. Kent's here from Denver. Whoop whoop. Tom Lloyd from New York City. Alan, they're showing up from around the world, around the country, to be talking all things bathhouse design, sauna design with you today. How's that
Yeah.
feel today from the great state of Tennessee? How are things in Nashville today, Alan?
Very steamy. We had our first 100-degree day yesterday, so you get a lot of sauna jokes when you tell people what you're doing and then the weather is like that.
Indeed, indeed. Everybody in the South talking about why would you need that? It's this hot already. I'm sure you've heard that plenty of times this week already. But I have the imagination that everybody on the call believes that this is good for us no matter the temperature outside, and people want it no matter the temperature outside. We got
And
Alan
you tell
joining
them that there's a
from
long way to go between 102, which was yesterday's high, and 194.
exactly. Alan's joining us from Florida, Tommy from Richmond, Virginia, Sonia from Charlottesburg, Virginia, Scott from Chicago, like we thought, Summer Bell from Oakland, California, Kate Woods from Jersey, Kate Taylor from British Columbia. Welcome. So, you guys, so excited you're all here. We're going to kind of dive in. We always pack these full with an hour, and we want to leave you feeling great. I'm going to say a couple things as we intro, and I want you to meet Alan, and then we're going to dive right in. So, one, you're already doing it. We want this space to be interactive. We want this space to be leaning forward and connected together. Functionally, you're around the coffee table with us today, not sitting back and just watching the YouTube recording that'll come out later. And so we're going to ask you to engage. We're going to want to hear your questions. We're going to want to hear your questions, not till the end. Don't say them till the end. Ask them right when you have them. When we're talking about a specific topic, we're going to have that conversation together. And you're going to see a few things along the way. Lindsay's going to jump up a poll here in 1 second that's going to ask you, who are you and how did you get in this room? What are you excited about for all of these things? And those moments for us, we want to know who you are, why you're here, and what we're diving into. So that'll pop up here in 1 second. And as we do, I do want to introduce right now this poll. It says, in what way are you interested in the business of sauna? Maybe you're an enthusiast, you just love it. You're like, oh my gosh, I want to go visit Alan in Nashville. Maybe you're somebody who's thinking about starting. You're kind of on the path, but the doors aren't open. Or perhaps you're somebody who does have the doors open. Let us know in the poll right there. Right now, I'm seeing about 60% on the way. We got 39%. That's changing a little bit. 35% who have opened the doors. Amazing. It can be hard and lonely to start a business and open a business. I'm so glad you're here because these are people around you who understand, who get it, who know the trials, who know the difficulties of being in a business like this. Alan and I have spent lots of time together processing through the ups and downs of getting doors open and getting an object built into the world. So, so glad you're all here. Thank you for filling that out. Stay engaged with us as we go. Today, we're focusing in on one of my favorite topics. Uh, it's getting things into the world, getting more public spaces for thermic bathing, sauna, cold plunge, all of that open, doors open into the world. And we're doing it here with Alan Penn, my dear friend. Alan and I have known each other for, I think we can say years now, Alan. It has been a little bit of a
Yes.
marathon.
Well,
And if you haven't heard already, Alan is the co-founder or the founder of Frameworks built out of Nashville, Tennessee. You're going to hear that story today of what it took to get that idea into the real world, to get the doors open. You're going to hear about their multiple locations that are going on there from big to small. And we're going to sort of get into what it takes. So as you guys have questions, especially you who are kind of working on process, Alan's going to be a huge resource for understanding how do you take an idea or a nugget of idea into getting those doors open and serving hundreds and thousands of clients every single week, every single month. So that's what we're up to today. It's going to be focused in on that. Um, Alan, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for spending time with us. As we sort of get going on things, give us sort of just like a little bit of how you feeling. The business is open. Give me just a like brief snapshot of this week in the middle of summer at Framework of how you're doing.
Yeah, so my background here is a little boring because I'm sitting in essentially an empty house that's awaiting furniture. I do have a backyard that has a sauna and some cold plunges in it here on the site of our in 2 days from now new location here in Nashville, which is a little bit different format than the first location that we opened just in January, but more similar to kind of our, let's call it V0 version that opened prior. And so we can talk about all of that. But this week was taking delivery of some equipment and blowing a bunch of leaves out of the backyard and hauling a bunch of trash out so we could do a photo shoot, and then hopping on with you guys here. So, it's sort of the gambit.
The classic entrepreneurial wears all the hats depending on the moment. And I think I hope some of the folks in the room today are feeling both that encouragement to, oh wow, it does feel like there's days where I'm a designer and some days I'm a salesperson and sometimes I'm an operational expert, sometimes I'm a marketer. That's real. That's so real. And you have a great team there to support you. So as we go, you guys ask any of your questions over in the Q&A. There's a little button down there that says Q&A. If Alan says something amazing and it's quotable and tweetable and shareable, type that in the chat window, give comments in the chat window, all that. And Alan, I want to hear as we get going, let's just kind of zoom back a little bit. Let's hear a little bit of your origin story. For a long time, you were not in the wellness industry. You were somebody who was working in tech. You were working all over the world. You've spent time in other places. I know you as somebody who can manage decision-making processes. I've watched that for 2 years as you're somebody who's going to learn and then let's get the best decision. And I think that a little bit comes out of running design sprints with engineers in the tech world. That muscle is a little bit in there with you, but give us this origin story of how the heck did you get to Nashville, Tennessee, opening a sauna cold plunge wellness facility? Where did that begin, Alan? How do you start?
So the direct path began about 3 years ago. I was at sort of a life transition point. I would say I'd done 10 or 15 years in kind of early stage tech companies and startups. Had wrapped up working at one of those companies and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, simultaneous to getting ready to turn 40, simultaneous to having a first child. And sort of all of that put me in let's call it a health and longevity headspace. I was getting blood drawn all the time and reading a ton about, things that would make me as healthy and active for as long a time as possible. Just sort of doing the math on like, okay, kid comes at 40, how old are you when they fill in the blank? And a friend that I'd worked with who I'd been talking, he's a venture capitalist, we'd been talking about a whole bunch of different business ideas, sent me a research paper on the health benefits of sauna. And so like I was fertile ground for that type of literature at that point because I was thinking and reading a lot about it and acting on it in my own life. And I read this and was reading about how you could address 4 of the 7 CDC recognized chronic diseases by sitting in a sauna. And that seemed like, really simple relative to many of the things that you would do for what would ultimately be much smaller gains than that. And so that was my like direct genesis where I started kind of pulling on the strings and I said, okay, well, let me just start doing this stuff. So I was trying to go around town and find a sauna, and it turned out it was like next to impossible to find a traditional sauna in Nashville. Like I think there was one in the county where Nashville is located. And then the experiences I had, I would call not great. And, from there, because I was sort of in that moment of also professionally figuring out what I wanted to do next, combined with the personal aspect, over the course of a few months, decided to kind of go for it and start putting something together. I guess you could say though the seeds maybe had been laid earlier. I didn't even think about this at the time, but it turns out like I spent a bunch of my teens going to a gym because my parents went there that had a sauna in the locker room, and I would just sit in there because it felt good to get hot. This was like probably like 1998. Like I don't know that there was a broad awareness, certainly not in me, of what the health benefits were, but it was there and it was a way to get away from my parents, and I was going there to work out anyway, so like why not? It felt great. And then you talked about I lived in Asia for almost 7 years, traveled a lot internationally with work, and just sort of as part of touring the world, as I'm sure many people on this call have done, like I always tell people like you could do worse than planning your travels around hot and cold and bathing and all these types of experiences. Because I mean, honestly, the best ones in the world, are not yet in the U.S. probably. In many cases, there's long cultural histories. There's a wide variety of cultural histories. And I just sort of reflected on that over the years I'd accumulated these experiences in different places. And I think it was one of the things that gave me confidence walking down this path because it was clear that while cold plunging, for example, has had this, moment social media wise or whatever, there was nothing new here. You didn't need to buy into any new tech or any new equipment. Those things exist, everything is being modernized and evolved. But at the end of the day, there was nothing new about hot air and cold water. And I loved that sort of simplicity and like multicultural thousands of years validation.
And I think that therein lies sort of this really interesting concept I see with you, Alan. It's attentiveness to both the science that does drive it for some people and the sort of cultural wisdom that is far surpassing our sort of modern science, right? Like I always say, the science is catching up to what humans have known for hundreds, if not thousands of years, saying hot and cold are really good for us. And so why don't we sort of think about how do we get that to more people in the US, which has a history of that in some spots, but not everywhere, and not in Nashville. And I think you're coming into that at a unique time. We have folks. First, I'll just say thank you for sending over questions and comments and all of these sorts of things. So I'm just going to highlight to everybody, keep sending those over. We're going to go through a few things. I do want to do a little bit of show and tell here, Alan. So we've heard the where you got to it, right? It was like, oh my gosh, I have this moment. I'm turning 40. I'm thinking about my own health, and now I don't see what's needed. It's that discontent of there's a product in the market that doesn't show up here. Let's look at today what framework looks like, and you can sort of show and tell us through the kind of stages of it. We're going to go through a few of those things. I'll pull that up here, and as I'm doing that, people feel free to keep asking questions. I already see in there Chris Rice asking, what's your favorite bathhouse in North America? And you started answering that already by saying, what's your favorite things in the world? Do you have I mean, other than framework, Alan, do you got a favorite of spot that you've been able to be to somewhere in
I
North America?
Thank you for including North America because I think my experience at Boda Boda in Montreal was one of my most favorite things. One, I was able to do with my family. I had just started thinking about this, and we were on a family trip with just my parents and my sister about 2 years ago, and we're there in the summer, and it was a beautiful day, and you're getting to open water, and open water is just always better. I had a chance to do that in Lake Superior, visiting Justin at Cedar Stone at their facility on the lake there. But getting open water is always better. And I'd seen so much about that. It's such a unique setup. I'm sure inspiration for some of the stuff you guys have done with boats, Justin. And I just think the more things like that are unique, that fit the city, and can sort of start building this history that people attach to, I think is broadly what the market holistically needs to get people excited because it does and should, look different in a lot of different places.
Love it. And here's what it looks like in Nashville. Here is, big homepage, big hero, but it's what I like about it is it's this video representation. Talk us through, Alan, the space that you've created there. What are we seeing? Who's coming in?
Yeah, so space. I think we always end up trying to characterize with size. So this is about almost 5,000 square feet under roof, split onto two floors with another patio, so you saw the outside space. Outside space to me is really important. You heard me just talk about that with Boda Boda and the way that that shows up in open water. Our first location was outdoor only. The location I just alluded to that we're opening as our second one is outdoor only, and the patio is an important part of the design of what I call the flagship location. So that's the video that you're looking at of our location that opened in January after about 2 years of design and planning. 7 saunas, 13 cold tubs in a variety of different formats. We have social and silent saunas. To help differentiate by vibe. We have indoor and outdoor spaces. We have large group and then more small group versions that I sort of equate to, like, are you going to a dinner party where you know everybody in the room with you, or are you going to a house party where there's going to be people you know and people that you don't? As we think about sort of how social shows up. We also have two additional sort of non-hot and cold amenities. We have a cafe, so I've kind of gone down the more F, or I guess more B than F, of food and beverage, but have done a cafe for those of you that are sort of interested in that aspect. And then we added a sound journey as well. It's a really unique product and connects on sort of the nervous system level into hot and cold in terms of kind of mirroring some of the benefits.
So we'll send over kind of the details here, these links you can go visit. The space is really beautiful and it's a ground up build. And so that flagship location for you, Ellen, you really watched from, I remember being in Nashville and seeing a dirt pile, like a lot that was like concrete and construction and rock and like not even the retaining wall in, and a full ground up build. So I do want to have some kind of openness here with folks about scale and size, and then even it's not this adaptive reuse. It's, hey, you said let's invest in a thing and let's make a new space here and let's make it beautiful. Along with this sort of eye towards how do we get people indoors and outdoors. I love, 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 love that. So as we go into more depth, there's some good questions coming in. Summer Jane is specifically saying, Framework is my most inspirational business. Wow, what a statement here for you, Alan. Uh,
Amazing.
who who did you look to when concepting your business? So I want to start there because now if we saw the visuals, right? We saw it's open to the world. You also said there was 2 years of process of getting that into the world. Let's go back before or after origin story, but before doors open and say, what did it take to say this is what we want? Who was concepting? Talk us through a little bit of that stage.
Yeah. So what I tried to do was just have as many different experiences as possible. Some of these were virtual and some of them were in person. But I had friends in Europe. I said, send me your 10 favorite places that you've been, and then let me look at them online. Probably 20% of the accounts that Framework follows on Instagram are businesses that do this. Every single one that I find anywhere around the world, I immediately follow, and then it just lets me kind of see what people are doing and be aware of what's going on in the space. I have a very like artist mentality of that. Like there's sort of nothing new. It's about the way that you sort of put your vision against ideas that have been done before. And of course there's thousands of years of history across multiple cultures. And so like I don't pretend to be inventing anything. Rather, you sort of borrow the pieces that resonate with you, that resonate with the reality of what you're building and what sort of the market needs, and pulling those together. So, found as many as I could digitally, visited as much as I could. Anytime I took a trip somewhere, I was like, where can I duck in? Went to a lot of places in Nashville, even ones that I sort of disliked the idea of, from looking at them online, and then just went and had the experience to cement why I thought that that wasn't the right way, and really try to figure out what the opposite of that was. Like, what is it that I don't like about this experience, and then how can I do something that is sort of the opposite of that more so aligns? Because there are just so many different ways to put together hot and cold as practices, to put together wellness spaces, to put together a physical space for any business. Even things that weren't direct. Directly the same thing that I was doing, right? Looking for inspiration in social clubs. I had folders of like ceilings that I liked from bars and restaurants that I went to. It's one of the things I enjoyed the most because I just felt like I became more observant about the world and the places that I was because I had that mentality. Like I'd walk into a locker room and I mean, you got to be like a little careful taking pictures in a locker room. But, I'd walk into a locker room and I'd be taking notes and mental pictures of the way that this space showed up. Because all of those I knew were going to be decisions that had to be made.
And that is, oh man, the joy of observing the world when you think about how do I create with it. Also the curse of like realizing all the ways that it's the designer's curse of like, oh gosh, that wasn't done very well, right? That little awkward moment of wow, I don't know where to throw the towel. That's the most common one when I see like architects try to just concept a bathhouse. I'm like, have they thought about laundry? Have they thought about the towels? Do they know what amount of back of house is needed? Um, Alan, talk about then the team that you had to put together because you didn't do this alone. It's a good question of saying for you, what's all your inspiration? What's the market? I also picture and experienced you sort of putting together your, Avengers team of like experts and consultants and people around you to say, hey, if this thing's going to be real, I need to trust the people who know what they're doing and do this every day in and out. What did that look like in those early phases of vetting out, putting together a team?
I basically led we did a crowdfunding round and I led the investor pitch with saying, hi, my name is Alan. I have never worked in the health and wellness space before. I have no experience with physical retail brick and mortar businesses, and I've never done anything in real estate before. This project will include all three of those things. And so I think it's just emblematic of like clearly I had to put together folks that sort of knew how to do this. And so, a lot of this does start unfortunately with finding a space. We can talk about different versions of that because I did the like super fast, super low cost version and then kind of the opposite of that, both. But I had a commercial real estate broker who helped me kind of think through spaces and what I started looking for and what I ultimately did were two very different things. And, that group gets a lot of credit for helping me through that process. Once we sort of knew that we had to build a space, there obviously is an architect and a contractor involved. I ended up finding someone who'd managed construction projects before and managed contractors as like an individual consultant to help me both at a process level and they probably paid for themselves 10x over in just knowing how to manage those kind of relationships and knowing what's typical and like I don't know, like how much does a yard of concrete cost, right? Like there's people in the world that know that like the back of their hand, and then there's me, right? And so all of those different things I was like, how can you find somebody that knows what they're doing? And then as you go kind of inside the doors, I've never built a sauna before. I started reading, but it was not something that I wanted to go up the learning curve and like learn every one of those lessons the hard way. And so I talked to a number of folks that sort of build saunas, sell saunas, and in that process met Justin and Cedar and Stone. And to me, the difference was like, are you buying a product or are you buying a partner? And ultimately that's the core reason that I ended up working with Cedar and Stone. So I mentioned seven saunas. The first one was a standalone kind of classic Cedar and Stone unit that landed in our launch location, and then was my first experience picking up a sauna and flying it through the air over a building, but not my last. And we moved it into the flagship. And then, essentially like at an architectural level, engaging with my architect, engaging with my contractor to design the rooms that would be the six hot rooms alongside of that. And I mean, those conversations are still going on. I had a cleaning thread with some of your team this week, Justin, as we're a year and a half into having one, and you talk about cleaning and maintenance. We've learned a bunch of things along the way. And, I think that's an active partnership, even though like it's done, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's right on of that thinking through, are you buying some prefabricated box or are you buying somebody who has kind of expertise in an area? And it's been a joy on our end to get to work with you and envision the space, be there at multiple points, help each stage grow. And I think on that front, I watched you put to be really humble and say, yeah, I don't know all these answers, but I know how to get people in a room who can give me the best information on this. And I think that for folks listening and for folks that are on the journey, Um, Not being too proud to say I can figure everything out and saying who are the people in my corner to make this happen. I think that's how you get big ideas into the world. That's how you do long-term growth. That's not how you do quick. And so if your angle is serve a community over the long haul, which Alan, you've said again and again, sort of the end goal, and we'll probably land on this later. The end goal is lowering cost and price and getting this to more people because that's where the true benefit comes from. Um, you need people to sort of say, how do I build a thing that's going to sustain for decades in this town? Not how do I pop something up quick and see if it works? Um, I'd want to come back to there's some good questions coming in here. Before we talk about just the build process, you mentioned it a little bit. Somebody is asking, Lauren's asking, I'm really interested in your journey of getting funding to build such a gorgeous facility. You mentioned crowdfunding round. Alan, don't feel like you have to open your P&L or your capital stack or anything like that. But anything for folks that are thinking here on capital fundraise that you learned in the process that you want to share of like, hey, here's what did matter. Here's what worked. You said, hey, I don't know anything about these things. I want to try. You had the right people in the room that said, hey, let's do it. But what would you encourage and what would you say on sort of fundraising?
Yeah, I think one of the things that a little bit learned um, through the process, but like looking back on it, I think was also helpful and could be helpful to others is this idea of starting with something that's easier to fund. And broadly, like let's call that like lower dollar amounts faster to revenue. And so I mentioned that we did this launch location. Because essentially, like to put a timeline to this, I started working on this the beginning of 2023. Met Justin shortly thereafter, had the parcel that we were designing for sort of like identified, the architects on board by the middle of that year. And 6 months later, I mean, we were submitting plans, which was like a relatively fast process to get to that point. The permitting was not horrible here in Nashville. The government is comparatively efficient. And getting ready to start construction, but even then that was going to be another year. So it was like, I think I did it fairly fast and it was still 2 years. And so I think that's, for a first time concept in an industry that is nascent, and not well understood. And, likely I mean, for me, it was for first time I was in this space, probably the case for most of you, just because the industry is so new. That's like a little bit of a hard thing to bite off funding wise. And then, big projects are expensive. And so one of the things that I think helped me a little bit with that, and I think could be helpful, is this idea of like, where can you start with something that's just faster and cheaper? And that was sort of the realization I had midway through that first year was I'm going to sit here for another year and still not have anything open. I'm going to have no brand out in the world. I'm going to have no operational lessons. I'm going to have no revenue streams. And so, what could I do to try and get something out there faster? And my initial idea actually didn't work. But it sort of then led me to the next one. The first idea I had was like, let me just go around and co-locate at another business. So I thought about spas and yoga studios and, mental wellness facilities and those kind of things where it's like, this would be complementary. And like, hey, I got this sauna coming. Can I park this out back your business? And maybe we can like use your bathrooms and your brick and mortar and you give me some customers and I get you some customers. That's more interesting. And I I'm still not sure if that sounded completely crazy or not, but actually four people were interested. But the particularities of like what the space was and what their business needed and kind of what I thought would work just never quite worked. This is kind of the case when small businesses and early businesses try to partner with each other. Like our cups are all overflowing and it's kind of hard to give to somebody else. So like, but the desire was there. And I still think that that's an interesting idea. I was talking to another founder just this week about a similar sort of approach for his business, which is in a different space. So there's something there. But where that led me was, okay, I need to like control the space that I'm in, but there's still a fast version of that. And so I found a 1 year lease on basically a backyard space behind a house. The minimum viable needs were like an indoor space to check people in. Maybe you could do without that, depending on the climate, and some bathrooms and changing rooms, and then enough space to land a sauna and some cold plunges. And put that together and had the doors open 45 days from the time that I signed the lease, with much lower capital outlays. And then all of a sudden you've got a business. And when investors are asking questions, you can say, I have real customers, I have real members. This is what retention looks like. It just is a much easier thing to try to get people to fund. You need less money and you're faster to have revenue in the door. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons that I advocate for that. And this was literally a conversation I was having with a guy in sort of the grocery space this week that I just alluded to. But this idea of, like, if we were building a software product, it would be completely insane to say we're going to sit in a room by ourselves and come up with the best idea and make it perfect and only then release it to the world, right? You would strip it down, you would release a minimum viable product, you would start with one feature at a time, you would get feedback because whatever you think is probably not completely right. And yet, I think because it's physical space and you're opening the doors on this thing and that investment is required, I've felt this, you feel required to make it perfect the first time that you open. And that's probably impossible and, leads to a bunch of these challenges, not the least of which is capital.
I think that's so right on. And I'm seeing a lot of people, the big hurdle is funding. Everybody's got the idea, they have the vision in their head. And usually a halfway step is what I would term a residency model or sort of a village model, right? Where we sort of use a space that's shared. So you mentioned this other business, like if somebody else can pay for the showers and the bathrooms, that's going to lower your cost massively. If you can find a space that isn't, let's build a new 5,000 square foot facility, or even let's build out an interior of a space with a lot of plumbing. These are capital intensive projects because they involve plumbing, HVAC, heating, like they're big, big, beefy build outs. It isn't retail space, throw in some shelves, put in your product and give it a go. And I bring that up because we are seeing more and more folks saying, hey, uh, put in 1 to 4 outdoor units in a property and let that be our minimum viable product. Let that be people coming in using the space, like you said, getting your brand into the world. And one thing I love about that, Alan, was some of the reflections as you were opening the big new flagship space where you're like, guys, we did it. They're like, yeah, but I'm going to miss the backyard. And you're like, I know, but also we just put all this money, time, and effort into this other thing. People really do love it. It becomes their sort of neighborhood coffee shop. It becomes that little intimate space where they get to know and get to enjoy. And I just, wherever entrepreneurs on this call can sort of be creative about how do we get the next step, not the future step, I think is that right level of thinking. In fact, Alan, I'll say just as a preview, you sort of did a great job of teasing our next month's webinar conversation is like actually deep dive in all things Sound Village concepts, webinar around that. How do you execute and what do you outfit for a space there? I want to highlight for folks, there's a lot of questions coming in around operational realities. But okay, now what is it like to run the thing? What are the doors open? All that. Alan, talk first about what kind of market data you were needing. Are there any indicators Ben's asking for enough demand getting started or what you charge ahead versus is it the build if you build it they will come approach? Talk to what were the key data points that you said, hey, this gives me the confidence to make the big jump in addition to the initial site.
I am not a fan of infrared sauna. Um, that is the primary install base in Nashville. I saw multiple brands, each of which had multiple locations in the city, charging kind of what I thought I needed to charge, but delivering an experience that I thought was not as good because I don't think it tracks to the science because it's almost inherently not social because the spaces tend to not be that interesting. And so I just sort of saw the opportunity that, hey, if these businesses are not just like surviving, but growing, right? They're adding locations, so you infer. Um, and I think I can deliver like a session, let's say, at about the same price point or a membership. And I know that the experience is better because I'm adding cold and they don't have it and all the other stuff I just said. Then that was like probably the primary confidence point. I do think, you can look to some of the larger markets, both internationally and, increasingly places like New York, where new concepts are opening that are closer to what I was sort of thinking. And you see that, that that's sort of working there. And, there's no reason that if something's popular in one part of the country, it wouldn't be in the other. The education is probably different. And I would say that that's almost it's not if you build it, they will come, because I think you have to do more than that to educate. Like the burden is on education. The burden is on, like just a general marketing effort, which not the least of which is like make people have a great experience. Like the probably the most valuable marketing thing that we can do is make sure that when we actually do get somebody there for whatever constellation of acquisition reasons cause that, that they have a great experience, want to come back and want to tell somebody. Um, so, I think it was like there's enough data points to say people have some interest in this area and are probably being underserved or not aware of kind of what they could be getting with that time or money. And then delivering on what you think your version of it is, to drive sort of recurrence and like butts and saunas.
Talk to me a little bit about how you saw science and social experiences playing out, because your bet early was the science. And there's a question in here saying, hey, do you need that? Do you need to prove it's healthy for people? Back to your sort of like educational components. And then you also have a cafe. You also have people kind of showing up there for that social gathering space. Talk a little bit about that, maybe tension, and then how you see those two things playing out.
Yeah, I just worked from my own experience, which was, as I said, I was in the health and longevity headspace, and that was so compelling to me. And so I was willing to spend the time and money to sort of invest in my health. Because I mean, I do that working out, and honestly, like sitting in a sauna, I find a lot easier and more pleasurable than like, lifting weights or something, which is more like you feel good because you did it, or you feel good after, you feel good about the results. Sauna, like you get all that, but also, like I think you get to feel this like wonderful heat and that experience. But I think I sort of missed that, like, like everyone is different. And actually, when I looked at why people came to Framework, both anecdotally in conversations and just sort of looking at like day parts, like let's assume that like the middle of the day on a Saturday versus like a weekday morning session, there's probably somewhat different intent. Um, or saw how many people came in groups and these sort of indicators. I really feel like social was the number one use case. And so it impacted a little bit of how we did sort of the space design. It certainly impacts the way that we kind of talk about the brand and the experience. And then it just sort of impacted the way that I thought about the value of it and how you sort of communicate that value. And so, there is, like in any business, you sort of have your like early adopters and your folks that they're already doing it or they know they want it, but they haven't found the right place in town. Like those are great. Get those people in. But I do think the fat part of the market is uh the customer segment that probably think of this as health and don't realize that it can substitute for like the bar and be a healthy space to go after work and working at home all day, or an alternative way to catch up with a friend, or a way to meet people when you're new to town, a way to meet, romantic partners. I know of at least two relationships that have started at Framework. So there's just so many indicators that like the social aspect, I think is really, really key to people. And I think it's important to think about what that sort of means for your brand and your space and your design and that sort of thing.
What does that mean in terms of you have two to three really large social spaces and then some of those private spaces, right? Back to the dinner party versus private dinner kind of experience, dinner party, house party. Talk a little bit about maybe even just what are you seeing in terms of capacity, percentage of business on sort of, hey, I'm booking a private space versus percentage of business saying, hey, I'm showing up here today and I'm coming in to the big spaces together. Are you seeing any trend currently in those things?
I think people are still looking at the end of the day as an industry, we're having to, I think, be a line item addition to people's monthly budget, and equally or maybe more important, their daily schedule and time. Because I don't think that people are saying, I'm going to forego my gym or fitness studio or whatever membership. Um, in order to do sauna and cold plunge. Like I think we're an and for that segment. And I think this is like the engine of people that are coming regularly, right? And so in order to do that, the cost can't be prohibitive. I sort of from the beginning have said I want to think about the framework brand and talk about it as a gym, not a spa, because with a gym, everybody understands that you're buying recurrence. Forget about whether that comes in a membership or a class pack or whatever, but you need to go regularly to get the benefits. And by affiliating yourself with a brand, you're going to come regularly. And with a spa, you go periodically, right? Like because it tends to be a longer time commitment. These are bigger sticker prices. And look, there's going to be a spectrum of brands across this. I think this is a reasonable way to look at the space, though. Like, is framework or brand X more like a gym or more like a spa? And I think you want to be flexing your price point and your experience based on that, and probably some other vectors here. We can turn this into a 2x2 or a 3x3, but like I think it's a good way to sort of think about your brand because you should price the thing and deliver an experience totally differently depending. And so for us, I just sort of made the decision that like because the health benefits show up from regular usage, and I would argue the social health benefits the same, right? Like if you only see your friend once a quarter, like that's probably not ideal for that relationship. And so, like, if you want the social benefits, you should also come regularly. Because we wanted to deliver that, we needed ways for people to come regularly. So, this is like, where in town are you and how convenient is it? It's one of the reasons that we did a cafe because I wanted people to be able to, like, can I cut out the Starbucks stop? Like, those dollars and that time. There's 10 minutes back in my day that maybe it's easier for me to justify going to framework and figuring out how to fit it in. And it was just all those things that, we universally see that people tend to have a really great experience. I'm really proud of the experience that our team delivers when people come. And if people stop coming, it's always, we love you guys, but like you're too far away or I can't fit it in the budget. Like it's time and money kind of things. And so to me, that's the thing to work on strategically. I think this is probably an industry point, but it's certainly a framework point.
Absolutely. I think you're right on with that. And you're thinking about it in rhythms and habits and building the sort of reason for people to come back. What are you seeing as it relates to memberships versus one-timers? What are you seeing at class packs versus, hey, we do a private once a month with a significant other versus, hey, I'm buying the membership and I am there 3 times a week, showing up and grabbing a coffee or grabbing a beverage afterwards. What's your constellation of how those things are interacting again, year one, right? This is starting.
Yeah, I think the the member frequent category probably falls stronger on weekdays. Nashville's a big tourist town. We get a lot of people in from out of town. This, I think, is increasingly a way that people travel. I alluded this a little bit before. That might be because you want a healthy version of travel. That might be because you are putting yourself back together after too late of night on the honky tonks downtown. So we sort of show up there on the weekends with that space. We tend to run programming into the weekends to drive people in then. If we're doing special events with partners, it just always like weekend mornings is the time that you get the best turnouts. Um, the middle of the day during the week is like super tough. Like this ideally would be a business that you could kind of run like a fitness studio, a lot of which are kind of open like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then they maybe do like 1 hour lunch session and then they run 5 classes in the evenings or something. I just haven't found that to be particularly useful because to like shut things down and then warm them back up or clean them again or whatever, you're not saving anything. So I think that's one of the things that is just like a little bit tricky. But I also sort of simultaneously feel that if I'm selling someone a membership and this ability to come regularly, I kind of gotta be open a good chunk of the week such that if they have the ability to fit it in their lives, I don't make that problem harder for them. So I think those are some of the realities that can be tricky, but clearly it's, different people come at different times. We've tried some of our more programmatic things on weekdays to give those opportunities to people. It's smaller, but programming, special events, partners are ways to get new people in the door and hit new audiences. And they lean into the social aspect. So I think it's really organic from that standpoint. And yes, Ryan, please come.
Yeah, Ryan saying, "Hey, I'm coming through Nashville later this week. Excited to check you guys out." I love that, Ryan. Um, Talk to me a little bit about just operational realities. What were you surprised by? What's been working? What's been tough of running a public bathing facility, right? This is a lot of water. It's a lot of humans. It's a lot of cleaning. And if you're trying to be that middle market for everybody, it can't be this like crunchy, hard to get to, hard to understand. It's got to be like clean and pretty and operational, like whenever people want it. Um, and one question I'm going to start with is from Nils. And Nils is awesome. He's in Vermont. He's one of the best traditional sauna builders in the country. He says, "How do you keep the multi-bather cold plunges hygienic?" Talk about your strategy around cold water with the provider you have, where that fit, and if you it, extra bonus points for Sarah if you talk about permits on that thing. Ready? Go.
Um, Cold water, cold tub permits is a complete mess. And I would be delighted to have one-on-one conversations about that. I want to be a little cautious in like public formats, but I would broadly say outside of New York City, I suspect everyone is probably breaking some sort of rule because the rules are old and antiquated, and the health departments are trying to catch up, trying to learn. Some of them maybe not trying to catch up, not trying to learn. But everybody I talk to sort of agrees that this is a pretty challenging operating environment. Um, as it pertains to cleanliness, I think of it as table stakes. Like if you walk into a place and you're gonna be in your swimsuit and it doesn't scream clean, I don't think that you're coming back. I always tell our team, like, I actually like when you change the water in front of other customers during the day. I like when you're out cleaning while someone is in the sauna. Like if you see something dirty while somebody's in the sauna, clean it right then. That shows people that we care about this and that it's something that we're always looking for. We close a day a week. We started probably more so for demand reasons to not be open 7 days a week, and then slowly shrunk that down. But we've continued to hold Tuesdays as a day that we're closed, partially for maintenance stuff. Like, I mean, we've been in the space for 6 months and it's still been valuable to have a day that we know we can send vendors in to fix stuff that doesn't disrupt the space. Like, it's just really, it's impossible to bring somebody that's a contractor of any type into your space and them not leave it dirty. Like, shoot, it's just not used to making places clean and leaving them that way. And so just assume that if you need to do that, it's really better to do that after hours. And having a day for that has been super valuable for us. So I think that those are, really, and I guess the last thing I would say on that point is like thinking about it from the standpoint of design from the beginning. How am I going to clean this once we're open? And what is that protocol going to be? Like, does it clean itself? How much are you going to do by investing in a space that's easier to clean? Like at the floor of our saunas is tile, whereas my outdoor one obviously is wood. Like those are different cleaning burdens and cleaning approaches and challenges. Um, and I'm really glad for all the investments we made, the places we did to make spaces easier to keep clean. You know, can you get it so that they drain easier on their own and you don't have to move water around yourself? I mean, those are really hard things that I would guess that anybody that's opened one of these spaces, myself included, I have a long list of things that I did wrong and would do different the next time, some of which I was able to fix, some of which I have to live with. Um, so you're certainly not going to get them all right, but unpacking and looking at that through as many lenses as possible, talking to as many operators as possible about like, don't, this is the general version, but like we could have the 20-minute conversation only about the floor around your shower. and then do that for a whole bunch of different types of spaces, is the level of detail that you kind of have to get to.
Yeah, and it's the level of detail that I would argue the stakes also matter. The amount of clean time, the amount of maintenance time, the amount of downtime is a real cost to your business. If you can make a thing that is easier to clean, easier to maintain, and easier to use, um, that's lower operating costs. That's lower time for your team. That's lower effort. And the more you think about that, the better. Coming back to Sarah's comment earlier about just permitting both and cold water, I'll double down and double click on that, Alan. It's different in every state right now. There is nothing that's sort of standard, and especially around cold water. I would just invite you to do your research at the state, city, county levels, and they could be different. The state next to you, or the county next to you, or the city next to you. There isn't a universal, there isn't an easy fix. So that's going to really demand your attention and understanding.
And I think
Um,
you should expect to get help from a vendor partner here. Whether you're buying a self-contained unit or you're building something in ground, these guys should know to some degree, maybe not every city, but they should have a sense of like, this is the range of ways that this could go. This is the ways that we fit. And I think if you don't feel like you're getting great answers there, I would kind of keep asking. Because I think that, those folks have, I think, some burden to help with that process. And you should expect that they can make you smarter than started the conversation. If they can't, I'd kind of keep looking.
so Alan, as we sort of round out our time here, I want to ask, what do you want Framework to be sort of known for in the industry? What do you see in the future? What are you sort of attempting for here? Because one, it's like the doors are open. People are coming. People are buying memberships, and it's just maintain the thing. But when you look into the future, what are these big industry questions we're trying to solve collectively, and what are those that you care deeply about?
Yeah, I think so. I worked at Uber for a long time, and one of our goals was to bring down the price of transportation. Quality transportation. We felt like taxi rates were too high. We started with a really premium product, but over time, UberX became cheaper than a taxi. And I think there's some parallels here where this the ability to get access to hot air and cold water to me is, I mean, I think you could look at cultures and countries that would call it truly a public good. It's a little bit of a tricky way to run a business, but I think there's an ideal version of that where we can get closer to that point. It's one of the reasons that I started down this path, because I had this insight that, the only this is not going to happen through everybody having this in their house. Like, as Americans, we tend to go to like, I want my own version of whatever in my place. But this is a multiple of cost and complexity to a gem to put in your house. And of course, like, most people don't have that. And so the way this is going to happen is through businesses or public facilities that you go to. Well, I think broadly we could probably all agree, like, it feels like it costs too much right now to go have that experience. And that's because, like, I mean, there's probably not a ton of operators at scale, at least in the way that I think many of us think it should be done. And there's just like a lot of, that scale at like Justin moved in a new warehouse so he could build more saunas. And I would guess at some point, like, if he makes more, maybe the price can come down. And the same thing is true for our facilities that put a bunch of these components together. And so I would love to see the ability for people to use this regularly be more accessible. So we need more spaces that are closer to people's house, that works on time, and are efficient and give people the choice to figure out the one that they want. So then that works on time. And then there's a dollar version of this as well. And like, collectively, if we do that well, that it's easier to find, it's easier to get to, it takes less time out of your day, and it takes less money out of your wallet. More people will do it, and they will do it more often, and everybody will then be happier and healthier, because we know that these things produce happier and healthier. And if we're doing that at sort of a mass societal level, like, I think we're solving a really interesting problem and making a big contribution to the health in as holistic of a sense of that word as possible, of the country. And to me, that's work worth doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's places in the world and there's places in human history where this has been done at scale. You know, you can look at the Roman baths, you can look at the countries in the Nordic countries, you can look at places where this isn't just opulence, this is a public good. This is the public town square. This is the gathering space. Um, and it comes with all these benefits, but oftentimes it also came with larger mass adoption, public or municipal funding sources. And I do hear it quite often like, oh my gosh, how do they do it in Finland where you can get sauna for 25 euros easily, quickly, and maybe quality? And I say, well, there's more saunas than there are cars in Finland. And if that's true for the States too, right? It does demand us to commit to getting more of these spaces into the world at scale, at volume. And I think, Alan, you're one of the people doing that. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being somebody who's committed to at least that part of the world and saying, let's do this more. Folks, I invite you to follow along Framework on all the things. Go check out their website. Like some of the folks here, when you're in Nashville, please have Nashville hot chicken and please go to Alan's place. I've done both. They're great.
Justin hot duo. Eat some hot chicken and get sent to sauna.
Uh, and Alan, thank you so much for being a part of this. Folks joining along, kudos for you. Thanks for joining with us. We do this every single month as we sort of dive into industry specific content specific to launching these spaces, designing these spaces. Next month, we're focusing in on that Sauna Village residency concept, kind of that halfway step towards big. And reach out to us if there's anything we can do on that. You guys, thank you again for being here. Thanks for all the great questions. And Alan, mostly, thank you for doing the great work you guys are doing in Nashville. We can't wait to see you there soon.
Thanks for all your help and Cedar and Stone's help in the process, and hope to see a lot of you guys in Nashville soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.